Hi everyone, my name is Giorgio Malaguti. I'm the product specialist for dermatologic and aesthetic laser from Quanta system. I'm really happy to welcome you to today's webinar, Challenging Pigmented Lesion with Discovery Pico with Dr. Nicola Zerbinati. During today's webinar, you will have the opportunity to submit test question to Dr. Zerbinati by typing it in the question pane of the control pane. We will collect these and answer during the Q&A session at the end of the Dr. Zerbinati presentation. Dr. Zerbinati works his practices in CMP in Pavia, Modena, Como, Bologna, and Piacenza. Furthermore, he is professor of dermatology and venerology at the University of Insurbia, Varese. He has more than 20 years of experience with laser. He is also the scientific coordinator of ICAM, member of Italian Society of Dermatology, and member of many more scientific committees. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really glad to introduce you Dr. Nicola Zerbinati.
Good morning, Giorgio. Good morning to everyone. Let me introduce myself. Next slide, please, Giorgio. I am Nicola Zerbinati, dermatologist, and what you are about to see is my brief biography, but Giorgio has already introduced me. Just a few words about the current health situation that has affected the whole world, has pushed Quanta system to develop a digital communication in accordance with the current health emergency. The key phrase of the CEO of the company and of the medical director of the company, Gerolamo Milionetti and Luca Cerri, was respect the rules, don't stop science. They convinced me, and so here I am to participate to this digital educational program where I will share some scientific topics with some close friend of mine. Today's first webinar is focused on the presentation of the efficacy of Pico technology in the treatment of the pigmented lesion. As you know, Pico technology was presented initially as a gold standard in the tattoo removal treatment. But during the time, it was observed the possibility to use this amazing technology, not only for tattoos, but also for benign pigmented lesion treatment and for skin restoring in fractional or in full beam mode. Next slide. The tattoo removal and skin restoring procedure will be treated in another scheduled webinar, probably. And today we focalize our attention on new epidermis melanocyte units. The complex biochemical signal intra and inter these units and the internal and external stimulus is the reason of the pigmentary changes. Next slide, please. Thanks to the researchers of the past 70 years and in the incredible scientific job of famous dermatologists and biologists, you can see the name of Patrick in this slide. Today we know more and more about the mechanism of action of melanogenesis. Next slide. The knowledge of the physiological mechanism of action and consequently of his pathological and paraphysiological alteration suggests us the best clinic procedure to achieve best clinical outcome. Next slide. Key players that regulate human skin pigmentation include melanocytes in the epidermis that synthesize the melanin and keratinocytes that receive and distribute it in the upper layers of the skin. Indeed, we have a lot of other signals, endocrines, neuronal, and pro-inflammatory signals. Indeed, more than 150 genes have now been identified that affect pigmentation of the skin. Next slide. Everything is very complicated, but despite it is not completely correct under the scientific point of view, but very effective for our proposal, we can simplify telling that two are the most important factors that induce hyperpigmentation condition in the skin. Melanin production from a physiological number of melanocytes and increased number of melanocytes, growth factor induced. This is the two most important conditions. Next slide. Melanocyte is the cells involved in the pigmentary process, and typically we can find between 1,000 to 2,000 melanocytes per square millimeter in the skin. Melanocytes comprise from 5 to 10% of the cells in the basal layer of epidermis. The shape of melanosome is an ellipsoid shape, and the dimension is around less or more 7 micron. The next one, please. Okay. Next one, please. Next one. Next one. Okay, exactly. The melanocyte produce melanosome, and in this article published in British Journal of Dermatology in 2003, the authors assessed quantitatively the distribution pattern of melanosome that have been transferred to the keratinocyte in the photoprotect skin normal Asian individual skin. And they compared this data with light skinned Caucasian and dark skinned. You can see in this slide, exactly, next slide, the dimension of the melanosome. Next slide. Okay. Inside of the melanosome, we can find the melanin. The dimension of the melanin is around 30 to 50 nanometer of diameter. This is exactly in green, the melanin inside of the melanosome. And the organization of the melanin inside of the melanosome can influence its dimension, but this is another story for another webinar. Next slide. Next slide. Coming back to the slide of the simplification of the increase of melanin or melanocyte, we can distinguish different clinical conditions related with this biological difference. Next slide. And this is exactly what we can distinguish in epidermis or dermis, two different conditions. We can see melanin hyperpigmentation or melanocyte hyperpigmentation. Next slide. Here, you can see a clinical classification of some pigmentary lesion in agreement with the biological expression and histological aspect. In the family of the epidermis melanocyte hyperpigmentation, we can collect lentigo simplex, keratosis, lentigo solaris. In the family of epidermis melanin hyperpigmentation, we can collect Becker nevus, PIH, and lentigo senilis. Ota nevus is an expression. Back, please. Back, please. Ota nevus. Okay, Ota nevus is an expression of dermis melanocyte hyperpigmentation. And melasma is an expression of dermis melanin hyperpigmentation. Next, now. Okay, lentigo is a big family. With lentigo, we usually identify a small pigmented macula surrounded by normal appearing skin. But as I told you, is a big family. Next slide, please. We can include in this big family lentigo simplex. Next, you can see the histology of the lentigo simplex and clinical. Next, we can include solar lentigo. Next, histology of solar lentigo. Next, ink spot lentigo. You can see the clinics. Next, and the histology of the ink spot lentigo. Labial and genital melanocyte macules. Again, next one. Okay, next one. And freckles. All these lesions that I showed you have different histological characteristics in terms of numbers of melanocyte and pigment distribution. So they have a different histological characteristics. Next slide. Next. And now, aging spot, Lifushin aging spot. One of the classic signs of the aging skin is the appearance of brown freckles-like spot on the skin surface. It is also known as aging spot or liver spot. It is a sign of a free radical deterioration of the lipids in our skin, oxidation of polyunsaturated fats and protein by free radical activity in the skin is recognized as the major cause of this liver spot. Next. So the question is, but Professor Zerbinati, where is still now laser and picosecond laser? We are getting there. But in my opinion, it is important to know our enemy, as told by Sun Tzu in The Art of War. And these are our enemy. These are the dimension of our enemy. 7 microns for melanocyte, 0.25 microns for melanosome, and nanometer for melanin. Next slide. Actually, next slide, please. Okay. Actually, you can find in the market a lot of energy device and laser that work with different pulse duration, very long and very short laser emission mode, used correctly for different clinical indication. But if we try to use heat in off-label mode out of their clinical indication, we can have problems. Next slide. In fact, if you compare, next, again, one type, okay, no, turn back. In fact, if you compare the different pulse duration in a different metrical scale, it is like if you compare a gnat with an elephant, and gnat cannot do the same work of an elephant and vice versa. Next slide. The same story in the next line if you compare the quantity of energy delivered in the skin in another metrical scale. Watt could be considered as a needle of mesotherapy. Next. Megawatt like a Burj Khalifa. Next. And gigawatt is like an Everest. So inside of Discovery Pico Plus, we have an Everest of energy. We have 1.8 gigawatt of energy. Next slide. This slide is to compare the different energy and fluence delivered by 2 different short emission modes, nanosecond and picosecond. Fluence in the left and energy in the right. Next slide. Working with an ultra short emission mode, we can shift from the photothermal to the photomechanical effect, reducing the thermal damage on the surrounding tissue and reducing in this way the risk of a lot of side effects. Next slide. With some next, exactly this one. With some mathematical simulation respecting the physical rules of the selective photocrystolysis, we discovered that we achieve data demonstrating the possibility to induce a pressure. Next type, exactly. We induce a pressure of 2000 bar in very small molecular size, working with a fluence around 0.3 to 0.6 joule per square centimeter. Exactly the dimension that I showed you before for our biological target. Next slide. But in mathematical model, we must consider the real fluence on skin that depends on wavelength at target depth. Due to scattering and competitive absorption by water, blood, and melanin at 1064 nanometer at the depth of the same target, from 70 to 25% of original fluence is really available. But Pico technology needs much lower fluence due to the much increased efficiency in the energy transmission to the particles as we have seen in the previous slide. Next one. This is an important anatomy consideration to put in correlation with the physics rule told before. The thickness of the skin is different in the different anatomical area, and also in relation with racial and age factors. So we must select the right quantity of fluence in agree with the anatomical side. Next slide. So always working with mathematics simulator, respecting all the anatomic and physics information, we can consider that working with 532 nanometer of wavelength, the surface fluence can reduce of 65% at about 1.5 millimeter of depth. Next slide. The same reduction of 65% is observed also for 1064, but in different depth. Next. The light penetration in relation with scattering and wavelength is linked with the dimension of the spot size. Larger spot size in the same wavelength emission have more penetration, but every time we enlarge the spot size, something changes in the quantity of the fluence. And this is normal. Next slide, follow me, please. Type OK. Increasing the pulse duration, and again, type next, and increasing joule. Okay, so increasing the pulse duration and watt, you increase joule. In fact, joule is watt multiplied time divided square centimeter. You can see on your left. Respecting this rule, if we increase the spot size, we decrease the fluence. Next one. But if we fix the short pulse duration, we are speaking about picosecond, and we want to work with large spot size, 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter, till 9 millimeter, to promote great penetration, the only solution it will be have in our laser machine high quantity of energy. And this is exactly what happened in Discovery Pico Plus, where you have 1.8 gigawatt of energy. Next slide, please. This publication and the next one introduce the concept of the possibility to work with less energy on the surface of the skin, thanks to the more efficacy of the short pulse duration on small biological target that usually is located around 1.2 millimeter of depth, increasing the safety condition, reducing the side effect, especially next slide in the Asiatic skin type. These are two most important parts. Okay, in according with the literature, having the possibility to work with Discovery Pico Plus with 3 different true wavelength, not dye cartridge wavelength. We are speaking about true laser wavelength, and 4 different emission mode, we start to elaborate our personal protocols. Next slide. Next. In accordance with the skin and lesion anatomy, we start creating the protocol changing laser parameters to achieve the best clinical outcome. Next. Type, please. Okay. Wavelength, again, press, type. Wavelength, pulse duration, and spot dimension. Next. Where select to find, again, press, the best, press, the best package of energy to have an interaction with epidermis or dermis lesion. So working with wavelength, pulse duration, spot dimension, we can create this package of energy, with this cube of energy, to achieve the best clinical outcomes. Next slide. And in this slide, you can see our wavelength selection in agree with the histological and biological condition of the different pigmentary lesions. Next. Next. Here in these slides, the package of the energy that we use. Naturally, these are personal protocols that all of you can modify and agree with your own clinical experience. Next one, Okay, the technical characteristic of all the components of Discovery Pico are designed to support the high peak power of energy to maximize the clinical effect working in the Pico second domain emission mode. The end pieces, for example, is an important technical component, and the lengths of the square and round shape are studied to promote the best energy beam profile on the skin. Next. In this particular case, a microarray lens technology is created to achieve a very good distribution and transmission efficacy in a square-shaped design. Ideal, this particular shape design for the tattoo removal application. The next one. And an holographic lens with less efficacy transmissions, but with an amazing homogeneous distribution to create a perfect round shape fluent stamp on the skin with absence of hotspot that can represent, the hotspot can represent the trigger of cascade of biochemical signal for a PIH, for an hyperpigmentation, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. Next slide. Here, it is represent the image of the homogeneity of the round Discovery Pico spot on your right. You can see in comparison with other competitors. I don't want to spend other words. Confucius said, an image has more value than 1,000 words. Next. But my time is finished, so let's move on to the clinical result and my personal experience. This was one of my first case treated in combination with 532 and 1064 in Pico second emission mode to achieve an interaction with the superficial and deep component of the pigmented lesion. You can see the area, the malar area treated, like area test. This was a spidus nevus, and I treat with 1064 and 532. You can see expressed the fluence that I use. Next slide. You can see, type please, next. Okay, you can see the whitening. No, come back. You can see the whitening of the malar area. Next slide. Also, this was one of the first setup cases to decide the right fluence to use in the epidermis pigmented lesion. The results in terms of whitening was nice, but the red component, meaning the inflammatory reaction, was too much. 20 days after the application, after the laser application, the inflammatory component was again too much present. The risk of PIH could be considered high. And here in these slides, on the magnification of the image, it is possible to appreciate the excess of inflammation in high contrast with the normal skin. If this could be considered a great result in terms of efficacy, is not the same in terms of safety. And see, I start to use 0.8 joule for square centimeter. So, next slide. So we started to decrease the fluence and at the same time to enlarge the spot size to reduce the superficial scattering. The clinical result was great, and in the same time, the temporary inflammatory reaction was less. In this image, you can see the result, the clinical result, 20 days after, only one session, working with 532 and 0.6 joule for square centimeter. Next slide. The same experience was reported by other Italian colleagues that started to reduce the fluence. Next slide. Next slide. And as you can see, the results are not so bad. Also working with less quantity of fluence. Next slide. Thanks some colleagues around of the world and his experience, I now have a good know-how also in Asiatic skin type treatment in different pigmented lesions. Thanks to Dr. Kinugasa. Thanks. Next slide. Then next slide. Next slide. This is the experience of Orinevus. Next slide. Go fast, please. Next slide.
Next slide. Okay, this is another friend of mine from Singapore, Dr. Kevin Chan, that shared with me his experience in post-inflammatory pigmentation treated with Pico before and after, but also other colleagues of mine share with me their experience. Today, thanks to all this experience collected around of the world, in my daily practice, every time I use if I use more than 0.4 joules for square centimeter on Asiatic skin type, I enlarge a lot the spot size, but usually 0.4 joule is my limit. When I need to increase, like in this case 0.6, I enlarge always the spot size. For damaged pigmented lesion, the high fluence, also with picosecond emission mode, is required to achieve good results. The advantage in comparison with nanosecond technology is the less total amount of fluence used to reduce the risk of surface damage and epidermolysis. This is a case of Quanta nevus treated with 3.2 joule in 1064 nanometer of wavelength and 450 picosecond. Someone told me it's not a Quanta nevus, so just for a few seconds, please type next. I remove next, and you can see the pigmented sclera. Next, please. Next, and before and after the clinical results. Next slide. Another case of Quanta nevus, also in this case 3.2 joule per square centimeter in 1064 nanometer, 5 millimeter of spot size, big spot size, and 3 treatment. This is the clinic aesthetic results. Okay. The next slide shows the last cases collected after more than 3 years of experience that confirmed us the extreme importance to select the right parameters to appreciate the potentiality of this amazing technology. In this linear asymmetric epidermis dermis pigmented lesion, we mix 532 with large spot size and low fluence, 0.3 joule in 532 nanometer with 9 millimeter of spot size, and 0.9 joule in 1064 nanometer with 9 millimeter of spot size. And you can see the results before and after 20 days. Next slide. This is the result 20 days after the application. What is interesting, appreciate, and in 3D projection, the evidence is even stronger, that there is not inflammatory reaction. 20 days after the application, the inflammatory reaction is completely disappeared. And next slide. The whitening of the lesion could be appreciated with an UV filter in lateral view. You can see in the right and the left the less quantity of pigment present in the supramalar area. Next slide. And again in 3D view with a UV filter, you can well appreciate the clinical and aesthetical outcome of the treatment. The next case is particularly interesting because we mix different wavelengths and also different emission mode, full beam and fractional. Unfortunately, time doesn't give me the possibility to explain this amazing chapter of the fractional picosecond technology. I will do in another webinar. But I will spend a few words just to tell you that in case of slight hyperkeratosis, pigmented lesion, the use of 532 fractional in association with full beam can reserve very interesting surprise. Like in this case, you can see the magnification of the area where well demonstrates the fine epidermolysis induced in the pigmented area, and in the same time the whitening effect before and after. Again, naturally, if there is not hypertrophic epidermis condition, you can treat with full beam mode. again, magnification of the area 30 days after the treatment. No residual inflammatory reaction, no residual pigmented lesion. A very nice results, in my opinion. Okay, the next cases apparently don't present particular difference compared to the case showed before. However, if you check the post-treatment photo, you will notice that the patient presents tanned skin without the aging spot recurrence. You can see. Next. The post-treatment photo of all the next patient was taken after sun exposure, and you could observe tanning skin but not pigmentary lesion anymore. 1 year of follow-up report to us no recidiva of the lesion. This is the patient before and after 1 year of follow-up. Next slide, please. Again, before and after another patient. Here you can well appreciate the tanning skin, and you can see that the aging spot is completely disappearing in a follow-up of 1 year. Okay, I will complete my presentation of Pico technology and pigment with a few slides on melasma. To completely treat these topics, probably we need a dedicated webinar. But just a few words. In melasma, specific melanocyte clones become hyperreactive. UV light stimulates the release of epidermis cytokines. Cytokines stimulate tyrosinase, and tyrosinase can induce the activity of melanocyte. But in melasma, we have also a biochemical chain of events. We have an abnormality extracellular matrix. We have a basement membrane disruption, an increase of vascularization, an incredible increase number of mast cells. So, as I told you, a biochemical chain of events. Next slide. And we think that all these events must be treated with different energy profile. Next. In the same, next please, in the same section to achieve an interaction with all the components of melasma. So, long pulse, fractional, pico, and nanosecond emission mode in the same session to achieve an interaction with all the components of melasma. Next, we are improving week by week our protocols to increase the clinical outcome. The use of fractional NPCs, in association with some chemical compounds and the application of the multi-sessions protocols reserve very interesting results that you can see and you can appreciate in the next slide. Before and after, this is a treatment with fractional NPCs, only one treatment in melasma, plus chemical compounds. Next slide, frontal view and lateral view. Okay. Next slide, we are arriving to the finish of my presentation. This is the reasons of my choice, why I decided to select Discovery Pico Plus. And you can read exactly the key point of my decision. 3 different wavelengths in the same machines. 4 different emission modes to expand treatment indication of use. Very, very high power, 1.8 gigawatt, to create bigger spot size to penetrate deep, and last but not least, high and low fluence always delivered in homogeneous mode. For this reason, I decide to select Discovery Pico Plus. At least, next slide, give me the opportunity with the last slide to thank all my colleagues who fight daily against the coronavirus. I want to remember them with this sentence of Napoleon. Courage is not having the strength to go on. It is going on when you don't have strength. We are Italian doctors and we don't give up. Thank you for your attention. Next.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zerbinati. Very interesting presentation. Now, let's go ahead with the Q&A session. So, if give some minutes to collect them. If you have, you can text it in the Q&A pane. So let's wait a couple of seconds. So there is a question, Dr. Zerbinati. The first one is what you use after treatment. So speaking about topical treatment.
The post-treatment care are particular cosmetic with a sonicate hyaluronic acid that can give me a very fast recovery time in terms of epidermis surface when I use fractional and also full beam treatment. So this is particular compounds that use a fractional hyaluronic acid. So very small molecular size of hyaluronic acid that is able to penetrate deep in the epidermis layer to promote the recovery, the fast recovery of the skin treated with fractional, especially fractional, but also in full beam mode. This for the recovery of the skin. Regarding the pigmentation, I use a compound where I mix hydroquinone, corticosteroid, retinoids, but also other substances like macrocea.
Okay, thank you. So next one, how about pre-treatment care for patients who undergo 532 nanometer for solar lentigo?
This is a very important question. It's a very smart question because I usually prepare the skin of my patient with some retinoids to reduce the thickness of the corneal striate, to reduce the reflection of the light. In this case, I can reduce also the fluence of my laser emission in 532. In the same time, 3-4 days before the treatment, I suggest to use, especially in Asiatic skin type and in reactive skin type, the corticosteroids, topical corticosteroids, to induce a metabolic depletion of melanocytes, so to reduce the risk of hyperpigmentation. So corticosteroids plus, retinoids plus corticosteroids to improve the clinical outcome and to reduce the risk of PIH. This is my personal.
Okay, thank you. So going ahead, next one. Can you also use fractional picosecond laser to improve hypertrophic and keloid scars?
This is an amazing story. In the fresh scar, the fractional picosecond technology could be considered like a game changer. But honestly, to speak about this, I need more time, Giorgio. I would be honored to have time to speak about these topics in future, because this
we'll speak about this probably in the next webinar session on scars.
The possibility to have an interaction with the pathological collagen fibers and the possibility to induce a rebalance of the pathological and normal collagen fiber is the key point to treat hypertrophic scar, fresh hypertrophic scar with this technology.
Okay. So next one question is, are you combining the different wavelengths during the same treatment session? If yes, do you see a synergistic effect?
In complicated pigmentary lesion, I combined 2 wavelengths, but always with low fluence. I never exceed in the quantity of fluence. So when I mix, I share the two different wavelengths. I work with usually 40% less of the standard fluence in standalone mode. This is my rule. And I saw an increase of the clinical outcome, especially for the complicated pigmentary lesion, where we have two different components, the epidermis and dermis component. In that case, the association of the two wavelength, and also, believe me, the possibility to use the ruby wavelength, because this is an important plus. Ruby is well absorbed from the melanin compartment, is not well absorbed for the vascular compartment. So all the energy is dedicated to the pigment. And in this case, the association of the different wavelength can reserve to us an incredible surprise, good surprise.
Okay, thank you. So next question is about pain. Do you use local anesthesia cream or just do the session pain tolerate? So
No,
is the, okay, sorry.
Is well pain tolerant, especially if you don't exceed in the fluence. Claire, if you treat an nevus and you use more than 2.5, you are right to use 3 joules per square centimeter. The pain sensation is present in our patient. So in this case, I help myself working with an air cooling device to decrease the pain sensation on the skin of my patient. Sometimes I use also the topical anesthesia cream, but the cooling device can reduce a lot the pain sensation during the treatment. If you work with limited fluence, around 0.3, 0.4 for the epidermis pigmented lesion, and around 0.9, 1.2 joule per square centimeter in Nd:YAG emission mode, honestly, the pain is not so strong. You don't need any cooling device or any local topical anesthesia.
Okay, last few questions. So the next one is, what is the endpoint of treatment when using fractional 532 to treat a pigmented spot?
In this case, the change of the color of the lesion. But as I told you, I use the fractional picosecond 532 mode only when I have an hyperkeratosis condition. In that case, I use the fractional technology, fractional MPs. If not, I prefer works only with full beam mode. The change of the color of the lesion, the great change of color, because you can see a darkening of the hyperkeratosic layer of the epidermis layer, is my endpoint. No bleeding, no.
Okay, great. So last question, and then unfortunately we have ended the time. It's, can we use square spot for melasma?
You can, but as I told you, as I showed you during my presentation, the end pieces with the largest homogeneity is the round shape. In that case, you lose a little bit in efficacy, but the homogeneity is honestly maximum. So the round spot, in my opinion, is the best solution for the treatment of the pigmentary lesion. Anyway, if you want to use the square one, you can do. There is not an absolute limitation to this, to do this. I prefer use the square in pieces for the tattoo removal treatment.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Zerbinati. You provided a very satisfactory explanation. Thank you, everyone, for your attention, and we wait for the next Quanta webinar session. Stay safe, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.